Okay, what I'm going to do is, before I actually start doing the dem thing, because the last time we did a Facebook Live for you, the surgery, I had a lot of information to give you before I could actually start demming or talking or displaying anything. So what I want to do is, I've got a few updates from the last one, just because there are things we were asked and I want to cover them and I want to make sure they're all sorted out. I've got a couple of comments and reminders from a few of the judges I need to pass on to yourself, and then I can get into the body of this. So the room smells amazing at the moment. It's full of ginger smells, which is lovely. I love ginger. So first of all, thank you very much, guys. We just checked the amount of members in this group, and currently there's 4,859 members so far. Thank you. It's nice to see you all here, and you are more than welcome. Let's see what else came over. Brief reminder, and I will say again and again and again throughout the Facebook Live, there's lots of information and we are still adding stuff to the Cake Doctor blog. So basically, if you go Cake Doctor, which is one word, is it .blog or .com? It is .blog, isn't it? So Cake Doctor, which is all one word, .blog. Go on there, you'll find all the handouts I'll be referring to. You'll see a few new things from me as well. I know there's recipes on there. We're adding to it as and when things come about. So if you're looking for something, go there. It would be beneficial just checking in there occasionally. Couple of things from Julie Askew, who wanted me to remind you. Cake International, the competition entries are now up online and can be entered. I will let you now know, because I'm one of the judges there, we've already exceeded the amount of entries for this time last year. It's going to be huge, so get on there, get reading the rules. Very important, read the rules. Look through the entry categories, find out what suits you best, and we'd love to see you there, guys. Well, I'm sure you're going to be there anyway, but it'd be even better if you pick up a prize. At the end of April, there's a BSG Sugarcraft Guild competition in Dublin. Unfortunately, circumstances in my life have changed and I can't actually get there, but I know Julie is going to be there judging. So if you want to see Julie in person, or you're going to go over there anyway, I've heard it's a fabulous show and I've now got to wait another 2 years to do it again. So unfortunately, sorry anyone in Ireland, I did plan it, but life got in the way. What else have we got? Okay. I'm going to run through the Cake Doctors. Those of you who've already been online with us before know who they are, but I do know there's a lot of new members and I'd like to acknowledge who the doctors are and their fields of expertise. So first we obviously have myself, Ceri Griffiths. I'm dealing with raw icing and confectionery. Confectionery is a wide scope, as we know, so know that I'll dip in and out of different things, everything from maybe cookies to cupcakes all the way through to maybe Turkish Delight, marshmallow or marshmallow, whichever you say. All of those things, we'll touch on those as we go along. We've got Chef Nicholas Lodge, based in Atlanta. Now Nick is actually dealing with sugar flours or gum paste flours, and also sugar paste as we call it, or in America they call it rolled fondant. He'll do that. He's also looking at other things as well, because obviously he's a qualified pastry chef, does teach at the pastry school in Chicago, so an absolute font of knowledge as well. And you will see each of the doctors drop in and out of the Facebook group when we can, work allowing us to do. We will give as much sound advice as we can. We have Julie Askew, who I've already mentioned. Julie is dealing with judging and competitions, and this is the word I can't say, Julie, Kanzashi flowers, which I believe is the art of making flowers out of ribbon, but Julie does it beautifully in sugar. So that's something to look out for. Hopefully Julie will write a couple of things for us and give us a few examples. Maybe, Julie, next time I do Facebook Live, can we have a couple of photographs and I can pop them up just to show people, because my pronunciation is a non-starter. We then have Terry Pringlewood, who's doing the decorated cookies. Now I'm doing cake cookies today. The recipe I'm going to be using, there's a recipe on the blog, that's cakedoctor.blog. There's a recipe there for ginger cookies. I'd recommend using that one. That's the one that Terry Pringlewood uses, and if you've seen her cookies, they are amazing and you can understand why her expertise is cookies. We have Lisa Speck out there somewhere in the world. Lisa is dealing with any questions to do with wedding cake, so that's everything from delivery to internal support. I would say let's steer away from asking people for specific recipes for wedding cakes, because I know everyone loves their own, but we will definitely refer you to recipes out there that will give you a general basis to plan your own recipes upon. There will be a recipe section on the blog eventually. It's just getting time for us to populate it. So hang around for that. It will come. Just keep checking back on that. I have Sheila Jones up in Glasgow, Scotland. Sheila is dealing with bakery and business. And then we have a new doctor, and I'm very excited about this doctor. We've got Rebecca Wilbur. Rebecca is actually the editor of American Cake Decorating magazine. Really good friend of mine. I've done quite a bit of work for that magazine in the past. And Rebecca has come on board. She's going to be dealing with photography questions and marketing. So by tomorrow about 5 o'clock, her bio and information on her should arrive on the blog. We're doing it as we speak, but don't hold us, because you know what? The internet's not playing fair tonight. So, okay, so look out for Rebecca. So that's the list of that done. Let's put that there. Oh, I will look at that in a minute, I promise you. Now, as a support for the demo I'm doing tonight, and remember, Cake Doctor is all about curing problems, helping those catastrophes not to repeat themselves. We're here to help you. So when you come onto the website, if you mention you've got a problem with a cake or a bake or a decoration or a flower or something, we may not be the only people who answer your questions. There's lots of talented people in the group, and those people all have their own version of an answer for you. You may get 20 different versions of an answer to your problem, but I can guarantee one of those 20 will actually work for you. It depends on which country you're in, what your humidity is, what your hand heat is, what the ingredients that you're accessible to. So remember, each of them will actually have a different opinion, and just find the one that works for you. But I do reiterate this, when you pose a question, please make sure you tell us what country you're from. So if I'm doing one, I'd say Great Britain or United Kingdom, Ceri Griffiths question. And we only want that because a lot of the time when we answer things, we have to be very specific to maybe food regulations in that country, or availability of products. Or if you're in the middle of Saudi Arabia, we need to know about temperature, humidity. Or if you're in Miami, we know everything's humid in Miami. Or in Wales with me, everything's always raining, it's wet. Or if you're in South Shields, still a bit of snow on the ground around here. So we can only help you specifically by knowing where you are regionally in the world. So that's a good one to do. Now, I'm doing some basic iced cookies today. I thought let's pick up on a couple of Easter themes. What I want to do first of all though is, as I'm flooding cookies, the first questions you're going to have is how to make roll icing, what do I need to do? So I'm going to take you through the basics of flooding cookies in the 3 ways that I personally know about. Now, out of the 3 ways, I do have a favourite, and I will tell you what it is. There are 2 other ways of doing it. One is more commercial, one I find I can never get to work, but I'm going to show you anyway because it will or could happen to you. Also, what I've done is, the recipe I'm using is actually a recipe which I use, which is using pasteurized egg whites. We've put this as a free download, printable, on the Cake Doctor blog. You can go there, print it off yourself. It's what I use when I'm doing good roll icing cakes, and I want a good stable roll icing. It's made with egg whites, lemon juice and powdered sugar or icing sugar. So that's there as a download. Okay, I am using ginger spice cookies. I love ginger. I like the darker cookie because it gives it a really good background for any icing that I'm putting onto it. I do use sugar cookies sometimes, and they're really blonde or really pale, and I find I don't have the drama with them, but I'm a sucker for ginger anyway, so that's what we're using. Now, I'm using an Easter egg cookie cutter. So, okay, this is the cookie cutter I was saying about. There are plenty of Easter egg cookies out there. This happens to be a Squire's Kitchen one. You could even make a template of cardboard if you want, whatever's out there. You could even get a round cookie cutter and just squish it into this shape. So whatever works for you. Now, we need to use run out or flood icing to be able to do this. So you may note I haven't put this in the bag yet, and the reason I haven't put it into the piping bag yet is because I actually want you to see what it looks like after it's sat. Now, in the video that I've made about roll icing, I did say you need to stir the liquid into it. Once the liquid is into it, let it stand for a little while. The reason you let it stand is because, as you can see here, there's lots of air bubbles, and you want those to come to the surface. So what you need to do then is just take a palette knife and give it a bit of a stir. And I'm stirring, I'm not beating. Okay, just to break up those air bubbles. Now, the first method I'm going to do is actually dipping a cookie. Now, I find dipping a cookie is a very commercial and quick way to do it. However, the results are not always uniform, and sometimes you do suffer a bit of imperfection when you've done them. And you'll see what I mean as I show you, because what I've done is I've already done one of each to show you what they look like. But this is how I would do it. I need a bit of kitchen towel or kitchen paper, because this can be messy. So again, make sure I've got no air bubbles in here. Then I'm going to take my cookie, and I'm using the baked surface. I'm not using the back, I'm using the baked surface. I'm going to take my cookie, I'm going to drop it into the icing just so it settles into the surface. I'm then going to reach in and I'm going to pick it up and pull it directly up. Now it's going to dribble. Underneath here it's running off. When it's finished running off to a point where it's just dribbling slightly, I just wipe away the extra run. There you go. And I have my cookie. Now, at this point, thank you very much. I've been IT'd, people. Let's just move this out of the way. Now, as you can see, it's not the greatest look in the world. I tend to find there's quite a few bubbles when I do it this way. So I tend to just get rid of the major bubbles first. Then you'll find you've got places where it's run. I tend to run my finger around it. Now, as you can see already, I don't find this very satisfactory as far as dipping cookies goes. Lots of people do, so I would say try it, because you never know until you've done it yourself. Let's pop that out. And you just need to move the icing around. I give it a bit of a tap from underneath just to help it all settle down. Now, as you can see, it does go quite smooth, but what I tend to find is it'll go over the edge of the cookie. So let me get rid of this cookie and show you one where I've actually done this method and it's fully dried. So, as you can see, this one is done and fully dried. Now, once I'd finished flooding it or dipping it, I thought it was okay, but then when I put it to one side to dry, you'll see stuff like this happens. Because there is no dam or no barrier around this cookie, the icing tends to flood over the sides. Okay, so for me, that doesn't work very well. I like things to be a bit pristine, but if you're doing like 500 or 600 cookies for a commercial order, I would say dip really quickly. Now, let's move on to the next one. Let's get myself another cookie. Now, with this method, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my icing bag and I'm going to put the icing into an icing bag. Don't overfill the bag, which I've just done here. That's because I was looking at the monitor, people. So let's take that out of there. Don't ever fill your bag more than half full, because you'll end up wearing it. It'll go up your hand, it'll pop over the top. Not a good look. Right, when you're not using your oil icing, do make sure it's covered with a damp cloth or a piece of plastic cling film or saran wrap. Right, I'm going to fold my bag over. Now the second method is, yes, they do outline it, but they don't outline it in a firmer icing. What they do is they outline it in the icing that you've actually flooding it with. So let's wipe that off. So I take a pair of scissors, snip off the end, and I'm snipping off probably about the equivalent of a number 2 piping tip. Then what I'll do is I just pipe a line around the edge. Remember, this is flood or flow icing. For me, this is possibly the most unsuccessful version of doing this, but this is why I wanted to share it with you. Now I have my cookie and I've got an outline with it. I can then go in and I flood back and forth, fill in the cookie. Now you don't want to overfill a cookie, but you need enough to make sure that the colour behind it is not being seen. Once you've done that, come in and just aggravate the icing slightly, just to make sure it covers all of the edges. It needs to meet that outline. Now I'm going to talk about quick drying cookies in a second, because I know someone's probably already asked that question, so I want to make sure I deal with that in a minute. So as you can see, I've come around and I've flooded all of this in. Let's put the bag to one side. Then I tend to use crank handle palette knives a lot because they're easier to pick things up. Again, I usually then use my finger to swipe around the side because it never seems to go evenly around. Now, as you can see, this method will give you a better coverage. But again, there's a slight issue. I'll just finish that bit off for you. If you overfill the cookie, what happens is it continues to flow over the side because it doesn't really have any solid barrier. So as you can see, you've got better coverage, but I can guarantee that's going to start going over the side unless I dry it incredibly quickly. And we will be talking about drying cookies quickly. Now let's show you what might happen if you have an absolute disaster. So let's put that to one side. This is the one I did earlier. Now, as you'll see, it's uneven around the edges. Now what happened was, I flooded the cookie and then I sat it to one side because when I put it down, it looked fine. But then, as you'll see, as time went by, it flooded over the edges. Now, to me, this is totally unacceptable and I couldn't use this cookie unless I was possibly putting on another cookie and putting a border around it. So, again, not the most helpful version. I don't like doing this version. For me, it doesn't work. I do know some people will actually just get a palette knife full of icing, put it into the middle and push it out until it comes to the edges. I personally don't do that method. I do the third method, which I'm about to explain to you. Now, before we go on to the third and final method, let's address drying cookies. Now, if you're flooding a cookie, what you need to do is you need to get it dry as quickly as possible, or at least the top surface of the icing dry as quickly as possible. That way you'll reduce the amount of visible air bubbles and you'll also get a really nice sheen to your cookie. Now, some people will put them under lamps. Some people will use like a heat gun or something. Some people, like myself, I will turn my oven on to the lowest setting possible. I will prop my oven door open slightly and I'll put the cookies in the oven and I'll leave them there for maybe about 3 minutes, 4 minutes. As soon as they look like they've actually skinned over, I'll then take them out and set them to one side. For me, I like to leave cookies overnight to completely dry, but then I live in Wales and it's very humid and wet there. If you live in a dry climate, you're probably able to decorate them within an hour or two anyway. Try not to leave them in the oven too long, because if they're in the oven too long, sugar can scorch, and also the heat will make any air bubbles expand, and then that will give you other problems. You'll get cracking. Also, as I said, if you've got a recipe that's got molasses in it or any sort of syrup, you'll find the heat will make the cookie softer and the cookie will bend. So, on to my preferred method. Right, my preferred method is actually outlining. So where have I put this? Now, whenever I do a cookie, I tend to work with something that's movable. This happens to be a non-stick pad. It could be a bit of kitchen paper, it could be kitchen towel, it could be parchment. I like to have my cookie on something so that I can actually move my cookie around without touching the cookie. And there's a reason for that, because if you see my fingers, the moment I do that, my fingers are encroaching on the surface of the cookie. That's why I use this, and I would use a crank handle palette knife to pick it up, because I don't damage my cookie. So let's turn this around so it's the right way up for me. Now, the way I flood a cookie when I'm doing the outline version is I'm using a number 2 piping tip. This happens to be a PME piping tip. There are equivalent sizes in different brands. I would always say don't assume that a number 2 in every single brand is equal. They are not. Okay, so I would say there's probably about 2 or 3 brands where they're similar, but always check. Just a number 2 for me is the PME, that's what I outline with. But what you're looking for is sort of a medium-sized writing tip. I've also got soft peak white royal icing in here. You could use whatever colour you want, the white doesn't matter. Now what you need to do is you need to actually pipe a complete outline around this cookie all the way to beginning in one go. Now, I'm quite adept at lifting a line of icing up and outlining, but if you're piping and you can't go over yourself, you can always turn the cookie. So it's a personal preference. If you're doing this for the first time, I'd say draw around the cookie and then have a couple of practices on a piece of paper until you become a little more adept at it. Now, cookie in front of me, as I said, I like to think of all the cookies as things that could go as favours in baskets. You'll note I've actually used a mould for the bow. It's a bow mould. There are plenty of bow moulds out there. I've used it because if I actually made a bow out of sugar, it will get broken in the packaging, broken in the gifting. Also, when I do this cookie, and hopefully this is one of the ones I can do for you, I was able to pipe a rope around there. If piping a rope is something you can't do, then there's a mold for it. Okay? Not promoting, guys, just letting you know there are plenty of options out there. You could even roll a single sausage of paste and link that around the top. So that's the second one. Next, I tried to keep really simple with this one. With this one, what I've done is I've just piped some dots around the edge of this. You will note that I actually did pipe in slightly from the edge to allow myself somewhere to pipe the border. Now, if you are piping a border on a cookie, it's wise to have the border so that it's contained within the edges of the cookie, because if not, they'll get broken off, I can assure you. This basic cookie, piped borders, put a couple of piped roses onto it, and I'll show you how to do the borders in a little while. Again, the next cookie I've done, really simple. This one just shows off the coating, a few lines, a little bit of a rose, some leaves on it. As you can see, it doesn't have to be complex. It just needs to be pretty. That's all it needs to be. Another one I've done, same idea as before, but I thought let's be a little more opulent, and what I did is I actually went in with some gold paint and I painted the border in the centre of the flowers. Now, how did I do the dots? What I did is when the icing was flooded and wet, I immediately took another colour of flood icing and I put little dots in and they all settled flat. And this is how you get a polka dot icing cookie. So my cookie would look like this before I start. And I've done one in white and yellow, although I'm not really sure it shows up that way. So see what I mean? It's quite an easy way of using different colours, and already that's a cookie. I could just put that in a bag as a gift and it's done. Or I could actually tie a real ribbon around it and it's already a cookie ready for you. So let's put that one to one side. Now, if you do not have said Easter cookie, it's Easter. Just give them a round cookie. And a round cookie, those are just two that I've done. As you can see, just simple little cookies. If you've put it in a bag and you put maybe a yellow ribbon on it, it's Easter. They're going to assume it's an Easter cookie anyway. Now, there is one more thing I want to show you before we start. This cookie, the basket cookie, was not flooded green. It was flooded two-tone. So the technique was that I piped the outline as I would normally, and then I piped a line across the middle. I then flooded this with chocolate brown, or just brown, any colour will do, and then I flooded the top green. So once it was completely dry, then I made it into the cookie you see before you. So let's have a quick look at a few of these. Now, as I said, I'm going to work as fast as I possibly can, just to give you an idea of how these were constructed. So let's take a number 2. Now, where's my little pad gone? There you go. Let's put this back on the pad so we've actually got something to work with. So what I do is I turn my cookie at almost a 45-degree angle. I'm using a number 2, again a PME number 2, and you will see that I pipe past the edge of the cookie and then I pull the line towards me and I finish at the edge. And I'll do that spacing them evenly along the cookie. One more down here, I think. And maybe one there. Now, I would normally do the entire cookie, but I'm only doing a section of it because you'll see the finished one as we go along. Where did I put the paintbrush? Now, the reason I overshoot along here is because it's easier then for me to go in and remove those edges and tuck the edge of the icing under the cookie at this point than it is trying to get it there in the first place. No matter whether you finished it off nicely here or not, I would always touch it down just to make sure there are no loose ends. Then I'll turn it in the opposite direction and I will pipe the opposite lines. Again, I overshoot and I will pipe the opposite squares. Now, if you wish, you could draw the lattice on there before you start piping, but to be honest with you, it's probably not going to work because you won't match the line perfectly on top. I would just eyeball it. So, where's my paintbrush gone? Come in again, tidy up those lines. Now, ideally, I would have left this completely dry, and then once it's dry, I just bring in some sugar pearls and I get my trusty tweezers, and I'm only going to do one section of this because then we'll look again at the finished one. I'll come in and I'll pipe just a couple of little dots, take the sugar pearls. I have to use the tweezers because I've got big honking hands, and I know that I would damage my cookie if I didn't. There you go. And another dot, and another dot. The reason I don't do all 4 dots at the same time is because it could likely dry or crust by the time I get all 4 sugar pearls on, and I don't want that. I want to make sure that they're still soft so it can actually grip the icing. So that's how I went ahead, and that's how I produced this cookie. So let's get this one out of the way. Put my icing tip under there, bring this over for you. Now, as you can see, it's quite a dimensional cookie. You could do any colour combination, but it's really quite an opulent looking cookie. It is slightly time consuming though, because obviously you've got all of those sugar pearls to put on by hand. Okay, so that's cookie number 1. Now, let's jump ahead to this cookie. Okay, the one that I know most people are probably asking me how I did. Let's put that to one side then. So let's pull in my 2-tone cookie, which is this one. Now I'm using a number 3 piping tip at this point. It's a thicker piping tip. First thing I want to do is I'm going to pipe a line right across the middle. That will just clean that line up. Now, I can promise you it's not going to be seen in the final cookie, but it's a good idea to have a baseline to work on. Now, I'm going to pipe a rope around here, and I'm going to work in a rolling action. Now, because you're doing a continual piece, what I would say is decide where you want the bow to be, because wherever the bow is, you can stop. Otherwise, you've got to keep going and turn the whole thing as you go. So just be cautious of that. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to roll towards the cookie with a small spiral action. If you do have to stop on the downward roll, because if you stop on the downward roll, you can then start again and it'll look almost seamless. Now, I know that that's where I'm going to put the bow, so I don't mind too much about a bit of a rough look there. Again, bringing it around. So that gives me the handle of my basket. Now, as I said before, I actually used a moulded piece, so I'm just going to put a dab of raw icing on there. The moulded piece is just made from paste with some Tylo into it, and I put that on there. As I said, if they weren't going in a bag, I would probably have made a sugar bow, one that was made out of gum paste or flour paste, so I could roll it really fine. And maybe in the future I'll show you a couple of those techniques, because that's something really delicate, but it's not something I'd want to put into a bag. So that's the first piece. Right, let's put that by. And where's number 2? Now, I'm moving on now to a number 2 in the same colour brown. Very much like the last cookie I did, I'm going to come in, I'm going to quite quickly come across here and pipe a lattice onto here. The spacing of the lattice is completely up to you. If you do not feel confident in piping a lattice, you could always get a texture mat or something that will give you a basket look along the bottom of this cookie, but I'm trying to keep it all raw icing for you, or as much as I possibly can. Now, you can also see there's another benefit to having that number 3 line along the top. It does mean that you've got somewhere to start the line, and it will attach to it. Just do one more line there, I think. Then turn your cookie and do them in the opposite direction. Now, obviously, take a little more time than I am. I'm rushing through because I want to make sure that you have something to look at when we do them. So, another one there, and another one there. In the perfect world, I would then go around and tidy up any edges around the bottom with my slightly damp paintbrush. You could come in and pipe a little shell around the bottom should you wish, but it's not necessary. So we now have our cookie. Now, this is a really good example of not picking it up, because if I grip that with my fingers, I destroy the edges, which is where the good old trusty crank handle palette knife comes in. Next in line, now I happen to have with me some raw ice roses, because obviously I pipe raw ice roses. So here's a few on here. There are tutorials out there on these things by more people than myself, so know that if you have a look around you will find pipe flowers. Unfortunately I can't demonstrate some pipe flowers for you because of a book contract I signed which said I wouldn't replicate those skills. So unfortunately, if I filmed it before the book came out, then it's still allowed and still out there on YouTube possibly, but I can't reiterate them here, I'm sorry. But I might come up with an alternative or maybe some new flowers for you for the future. So coming back to this. I then got myself a number 51 piping tip, a 51 PME, and it's a leaf tip. So what happens is, as I squeeze it, it will give me a leaf. Okay, a little leaf. It's a really handy tip to have. I would say if you're going to buy any tips at all, I buy a 50 and a 52 or a 51. Those two tips should do most things. Now, because I want there to be quite a lot of flowers on here, I'm going to come in straight away and I'm going to put leaves on there. Now you're going to have to add more leaves afterwards, but this is just protection. So if you actually look through the leaves or through the flowers, you will see that there's green in the background and not brown. So that's usually my base for most things. As I said, I'm probably like to cover most of these up. Now unfortunately I can't see currently what we're doing, so I'm going to ask person in the corner in a little while to possibly ask me some questions or say what you're seeing, because I can't see because technical issues here in South Shields. I've lost most things. So as you can see, I'm just adding wherever I need these to be, and I'm not being picky about it. It's a basket of flowers. I'm not expecting it to be all bells and whistles and beautiful. I just want it to be cute. I'll periodically come in and fill in gaps with some leaves just to build up the layers of it all. Pop a couple in there. Now every time I do this, I can guarantee it's not going to look identical, and that's fine with me. I'm quite happy with that. Sit one there. Right, that looks like too much of a straight line to me, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull one of those out and put another one in there just to give it a little bit more of dimension. So last thing I'll do then after I've done that is I'll go around and stick extra leaves in, just because if you've got leaves only in the background it looks a bit false, but if you've got them sticking up left, right and everywhere, it looks a lot more realistic. So as you can see, it didn't take me long to do that. Also, it could have been done with plunger blossoms. It could have been done with moulded flowers. It doesn't necessarily have to be pipe flowers. It's just an idea. So there you go. There's the one I did earlier, and there's the one I just did now. So you can see that only took a few minutes to do. So it's a case of once the cookie is iced, it's easily to tickle it up with something. So let's put that to one side. So let's look at the next one now. This was a really, really simple cookie to do. Okay. Again, I turned it on its side. Now, I'm quite confident at my spacing, but if you wanted to put a strip of paper on there as a template, you could easily do that. So, I'm going to use the number 2 again. Now, you'll note that I'm using the same numbers all the time. That's very much a commercial trick. If I use the same numbers, that means I've got less bags to juggle around with. So I'm going to come in, and this time I'm doing it on this angle. That's 1. And I'm going to just do 2 lines on this one. You'll see every time I do it, I overshoot the cookie, and that's on purpose because I want it to grip the edge of the icing so I can actually tuck it underneath. So if again I take my slightly damp paintbrush, I can then come in here and just cut those little excess pieces off. Nice and tidy. And again, where I finished off, I just want to make sure these are fully in contact with my egg. So, as you can see, doesn't matter which way you do it, it's just still cute. Anything on an angle will always look more exciting than straight across. So let's come in and do something else. Right. On the original I did dots, and all I did was exactly what I've done around the edge. I just pipe the little dots along the edges I want, evenly spaced. Now I can probably do all of these dots before I have to go back and touch them off because I'm piping quite quickly. And then go in with my slightly damp paintbrush and just touch them down. There you go. And I think at the top I'm going to do something slightly different. I'm just going to put a line across here just to show a variation. And touch off the top. Now in the middle you see I've got a curled line. Don't worry guys, it's not that difficult. Just practice on a bit of paper. You don't have to get it right every time. I'm not going to be paranoid that it goes wrong. If it goes wrong, I'm just going to put the flower in a different place or maybe add a few more leaves. There we go. Let's see what flower. I did orange on that one. Let's change flowers. Let's do a little carnation in the middle of this one. So again, all I did was come in, a couple of leaves. Let's move you over to one side. This is the joy, of course, of having this mat, because I can move it around without touching it. Little tiny carnation right in the middle, and it's pretty much finished. If I wanted to put dots in or I wanted to put sugar pearls in, so I could. But as you can see, you can simplify even more without losing the overall effect. So let's move you back over here. Now what I want to do is just clean the decks down a second. Excuse any noises, hopefully that didn't go through anyone's teeth. And I'm going to bring them all back in so you can take a last look at the ones that we've done. So you can see basic shapes, basic egg shapes, and we've just used some basic skills to actually pull them into aesthetic looks. The reason this group is so popular is because we're all like-minded people trying to help and support each other. I personally would like to say, however, we're excited to see your work and we're excited to see the results of your work. We'd like to see more of things that have gone wrong that we've then corrected. So if you're having a problem, and that's what we're here for, and we've helped you, show us what you've done afterwards and let us celebrate with you how you've cured it. Now, as I said, we do have a list of doctors here at Cake Doctor blog, but everyone on here is an expert at some way in some skill. So don't forget, it's not just the cake doctors that will give you advice, others will as well. We're all there to support. We're a really sweet, sugary community, guys. The only way we're going to make all of this work is to help each other.